Hello, rats! Welcome to another episode of Songs and Sorcery. It is I, your host, Leonok, and I am here with another beautiful chapter of Stephen King's novel Fairy Tale. We've been reading this for the past, on a span of several months, and though things have been quite hectic and rather busy, every now and then it is good for us to sort of delve into a good story, a good book, and just get lost in its pages. All right? Now, if I'm not mistaken, we should be in chapter 5 of this great novel, of whose title is Shopping, My Father's Pipe, A Call from Mr. Bowditch, The Flower Canister. Let us begin. We went to the hardware store to get a safety bar installation kit, then to Pet Pantry, where there was also a walk-in veterinary. I got heartworm chewables and carprofen for Radar's arthritis. That stuff is supposed to be by prescription only, but when I explained the situation, the lady gave it to me, only specifying that the meds had to be a cash deal. She said Mr. Bowditch bought all of Radar's stuff there, paying extra for delivery. They had used his credit card for the safety bar kit. I used my own money for the pills. Our last stop was the drugstore, where I bought a urinal with a long neck, a bedpan, the disinfectant I was supposed to use for the pin care, and 2 spray bottles of heavy-duty window cleaner. I paid for that stuff too, but not cash. I had a $250 limit on my Visa, but wasn't worried the card would be refused. I was never what you'd call a shop till you drop type. On the ride home, I kept expecting Dad to talk to me about this commitment I'd made, which was after all pretty big for a kid of 17. He didn't, though just listened to classic rock on the radio and sometimes sang along. I found out soon enough that he was just deciding what he wanted to say. I walked up to Mr. Bowditch's house, where I was greeted by Radar. I put her meds on the counter, then peeked in the bathroom. I thought the tight quarters would actually be helpful when it came to installing the safety bars, and for him using them. But that was tomorrow's job. I'd seen a pile of clean rags on the shelf over the washing machine in the cellar. I went down and grabbed a double handful. It was a pretty spring day, and my initial idea had been to spend it outdoors putting the fence to rights. But I decided that the windows should come first, so the stink of the cleanser would be out of the house when Mr. Bowditch came back. It also gave me an excuse to tour the place. In addition to the kitchen, pantry, and living room, the places where he actually lived, there was a dining room with a long table covered with a dust cloth. There were no chairs, which made it look pretty empty. There was also a room meant to be a study or a library, or a combination of the two. I saw with real dismay that the ceiling had leaked and some of the books had gotten wet. These were nice ones, too, expensive looking and leather bound, not like the careless stacks in the back hall. There was a set of Dickens, a set of Kipling, a set of Mark Twain, and a set of someone named Thackeray. I decided that when I had more time, I'd pull them from their shelves, spread them on the floor, and see if they could be saved. There were probably YouTube videos about how to do that. I pretty much lived by the tube that spring. There were 3 bedrooms on the second floor, plus a linen closet and another bigger bathroom. His bedroom was lined with more bookshelves, and there was a reading lamp on the side of the bed where he obviously slept. The books in here were mostly paperbacks, mysteries, science fiction, fantasy, and pulp horror going back to the 40s. Some looked really good, and I thought if things went okay, I'd ask to borrow some. I guess Thackeray would be heavy going, but The Bride Wore Black looked right up my street. The bodacious bride on the cover was wearing black, all right, but not much of it. There were 2 books on his bed table, a paperback called Something Wicked This Way Comes by Ray Bradbury, and a thick hardcover tome titled The Origins of Fantasy and Its Place in the World Matrix, Jungian Perspectives. On the cover was a funnel filling up with stars. One of the other bedrooms held a double bed that had been made up but was covered with a plastic sheet. The third was completely empty and smelled stale. If I had been wearing hard shoes instead of sneaks, my footfalls would have made spooky hollow sounds in that one. Narrow stairs, cycle stairs, I thought, led up to the 3rd floor. It wasn't an attic, but was being used as one. There was plenty of furniture jumbled up in the 3 rooms, including 6 fancy chairs that were probably supposed to go with the dining room table, and the bed from the empty room, with its head laid lengthwise across it. There were a couple of bikes, one missing a wheel, dusty cartons of old magazines, and in a third and smallest room, a wooden box of what looked like carpentry tools from the time when taking pictures were new. On the side, faded, with initials AB. I picked out the drill, thinking it would help with the safety bar installation, but it was frozen solid. And no wonder. The roof had leaked in the corner where the tools had been left, and the whole works, drill, 2 hammers, saw, a leveling gadget with a bleary yellow bubble in the middle, had gone to Rust City. Something needed to be done about the leaky roof, I thought, and before the next winter arrived or there would be structural damage, if there hadn't been already. I started with the windows on the 3rd floor, because they were the dirtiest. Filthy, in fact. I could see it be changed in water from my bucket often, and of course, the insides were only half the job. I knocked off for lunch, heating a can of chili on the elderly hot point. Should I let you lick the bowl? I asked Radar. She looked up at me with those big brown eyes of hers. I wouldn't tell if you won't. I put it down, and she went at it. Then I went back to the windows. By the time I finished, it was mid-afternoon. My fingers looked pruny, and my arms were tired from all the rubbing. But Windex and vinegar, a YouTube tip, really did make a difference. The house was filled with light. I like it, I said. Want to take a stroll down to my house? See what Dad's up to? She barked that she did. Dad was waiting for me on the front porch. His pipe was on the trail. Well, on the rail, actually, along with a pouch of tobacco. Which meant he would be having the talk after all. A serious one. There was a time when my dad smoked cigarettes. I don't remember how old I was when Mom gave him the pipe for his birthday. It wasn't a fancy Sherlock Holmes job, but I think expensive. I'd remember she'd been asking him to quit the cancer sticks, and he kept promising, vaguely, the way addicts do, that he would get around to it. The pipe did the trick. First he cut down on the butts, then let them go entirely not long before Mom crossed the goddamn bridge, the garden bridge, to get us a box of chicken. I liked the smell of the 3 sales he got at the tobacconist downtown, but quite often there was nothing to smell because it kept going out. That might have been part of Mom's master plan, but I never got a chance to ask her. Eventually the pipe went into the pipe rack on the mantel, at least until Mom died. Then it came out again. I never saw him with another cigarette during his drinking years, but the pipe was always with him at night while he watched those old movies. Though he rarely lit it or even filled the bowl, he chewed hell out of the stem and the bit, though and had to replace both. He took the pipe with him to AA meetings when he started going. There was no smoking there, so he chewed on the stem sometimes. Lindy frankly told me this, with the bowl upside down. Around the time of his 2nd anniversary, the pipe went back into the rack on the mantel. I asked him about it once, and he said, "I'm 2 years sober. I think it's time I stopped teething." But the pipe still came out once in a while, before some of the big agent meetings at the Chicago office if he had to make a presentation. Always on the anniversary of Mom's death. And it was out now, complete with tobacco, which meant that this was going to be a very serious talk. Radar climbed to the porch, old lady style, pausing to inspect each step. When she finally made it, Dad scratched behind her ears. "Who's a good girl?" Radar made a woofing noise and lay down beside Dad's rocker. I took the other one. "Did you get her started on the meds?" "Not yet. I'll sneak the heartworm and the arthritis pills into her supper." "You didn't take the safety bar installation kit?" "That's for tomorrow. I'll read the instructions tonight. Also, the Home Care for Dummies pamphlet. I need to borrow your drill if it's okay. I found someone's toolbox, initials AB on it. Maybe his father's or grandfather's, but everything in it's rusty. The roof leaks." "You're welcome to it." He reached for the pipe. The bowl was already loaded. He had some kitchen matches in his breast pocket, and he scratched one alight with his thumbnail. A skill that had fascinated me as a little kid. Still did, actually. "You know, I'd be happy to go up there with you and help out." "No, that's okay. It's a pretty small bathroom, and we just get in each other's way."
"That's not really it, is it, Chip?"
How long had it been since he'd called me that? 5 years? He held the lit match already halfway down the stick over the bowl and began sucking away. Also waiting for me to reply, of course. But I had nothing. Radar raised her head, smelled the fragrant tobacco smoke, then put her snout back on the porch boards. She looked pretty contented. He shook out the match.
There's nothing up there you don't want me to see, is there?
That made me think of Andy, asking if there were a lot of stuffed animals in a spooky Kit Kat clock that followed you with its eyes. I smiled. No, it's just a house, kind of run down with a leaky roof. Something will have to be done about that eventually. He nodded and puffed his pipe.
I talked to Lindy about this situation.
I wasn't surprised. Lindy was his sponsor, and Dad was supposed to talk about the things that bothered him.
He says that maybe you have a caretaker mentality. Well, I do, actually, from when I was boozing. God knows there were times when you did caretake me, young as you were, cleaned the house, did the dishes, got your own breakfast, and sometimes your dinner.
He paused.
Those days are hard for me to remember, and even harder to talk about.
It's not that.
Then what is it?
I still didn't want to tell him I'd made a deal with God and had to keep up my end of the bargain. But there was something else I could tell him. Something he'd understand, and fortunately, it was true. You know how they talk in AA about maintaining an attitude of gratitude? He nodded.
A grateful alcoholic doesn't get drunk. That's what they say.
And I'm grateful you don't drink anymore. Maybe I don't tell you all the time, but I am. So why don't we say I'm trying to pay it forward and leave it at that? He took his pipe from his mouth and swiped a hand across his eyes.
All right, we will. But I want to meet him eventually. Feel like it's my duty. Do you understand that?
I said I did. Maybe when he was a little bit down from the road or the accident.
He nodded. That works. I love you, kiddo.
Love you too.
As long as you understand you're biting off a lot, you know that, right?
I did. And I was aware I didn't know just how much. I thought that was good. If I really knew, I might lose heart. There's this other thing they say in your program about taking it a day at a time. He nodded.
Okay. But spring vacation will be over fast. You have to keep up with your studies, no matter how much time you feel you have to spend up there. I insist on that.
Okay. He looked at the pipe.
This thing has gone out. It always does.
He put it on the porch rail, then leaned down and scratched the thick fur on the nape of the radar's neck. She raised her head, then lowered it again.
This is a damn good dog.
She is.
Fell in love with her, didn't you?
Well, yeah, I guess so.
She's got a collar but no tag, which means Mr. Bowden just hasn't paid the dog tax. My guess is she's never been to the vet.
Mine too.
Never been vaccinated for rabies, among other things.
He paused, then said,
Got a question, and I want you to think about it. Very seriously. We're going to end up on the hook for this. The groceries, the dog meds, the safety bars.
Don't forget the urinal, I said.
Are we? Tell me what you think.
He told me to keep track and he'd take care of the expenses. This was half an answer at best. I knew it and Dad probably did too. On second thought, strike the probably.
Not that we're exactly no hole on his account. A couple of $100 is all, but the hospital. Do you know how much a week's stay in Arcadia costs? Plus the operations, of course, and all the aftercare.
I didn't, but as an insurance adjuster, Dad did.
$80,000 minimum.
There's no way we could be in the hook for that. Could we?
No, that's all him. Don't know what kind of insurance he has, or if he has any. I checked with Lindy, and he has nothing with Overland. Overland, Medicare, probably. Beyond that, who knows?
He shifted in his seat.
I checked him out a little bit. Hope that doesn't make you mad.
It didn't. It didn't surprise me, because checking people out was what my father did for a living, and I was curious, of course. What did you find?
Almost nothing, which I would have said was impossible in this day and age.
Well, he doesn't have a computer, even a cell phone, which lets out Facebook and any other social media. I had an idea that Mr. Bowditch would have sneered at Facebook even if we had a computer. Facebook was snoopy.
You said there were initials on the toolbox you found. AB, right?
Right.
That fits. The property at the top of the hill comprises an acre and a half, which is a hell of a good patch. It was purchased by someone named Adrian Bowditch in 1920.
His grandfather?
Maybe. But given how old he is, it could have been his father.
Dad plucked his pipe off the porch rail, gave the bit a chew or two, then put it back.
How old is he anyway? Does he really not know, I wonder?
I guess it's possible.
When I saw him back in the old days, this was before he more or less holed up. He looked about 50. I'd give him a wave, and sometimes he'd flip a hand back to me.
Never spoke to him?
Might have said hi, I guess, or passed a word about the weather if it was worth commenting on, but he wasn't the conversational type. Anyway, what would have made him roughly the right age for Vietnam, but I couldn't find any military record.
So he didn't serve?
Probably didn't serve. I probably could have found out more if I was still working for Overland, but I'm not, and I didn't want to ask Lindy.
I get it.
I established that he's got at least some money, because property taxes are a matter of public record, and the tab on number 1 Sycamore in 2012 was 22,000 and change.
He pays that every year?
It varies. The important part is he's paying it, and he was here when your mom and I moved in. Maybe I told you that. He would have been shelling out a lot less back in the day. Property taxes have gone up like everything else, but he'll still make talking 6 figures and all. It's a big lot. What did he do before he retired?
I don't know. I really just met the guy, and he was messed up when I did. We haven't had what you'd call a real heart-to-heart. Although that was coming, I just didn't know it yet.
I don't know either. I looked but didn't find. Which it bears repeating, I would have said was possible in this day and age. I've heard of people going off-grid, but usually in the wilds of Alaska with a cult that thinks the world's going to end, or in Montana like the Unabomber.
You know who?
A domestic terrorist. Real name, Ted Kaczynski. You didn't happen to see any bomb-making equipment lying around Bowditch's house, did you?
Dad said this with a humorous lift of his eyebrows, but I wasn't entirely sure he was joking.
The most dangerous thing I've seen was a scythe.
Oh, and a rusty hatchet in that toolbox on the 3rd floor.
Any pictures? Like of his father and mother, or him when he was young?
No. The only one I saw was a photo of Radar. It's on the table beside his easy chair in the living room.
Huh.
Dad reached for his pipe, changed his mind.
We don't know where his money comes from, assuming he still has some, and we don't know what he did for a living. Something from a home, I assume, because he's an agoraphobe. That means...
I know what it means.
My guess is he's always tended in that direction, and it got worse as he got older. He pulled in.
The lady across the street told me he used to walk Radar at night. She pricked up her ears at the sound of a name. It seemed a little weird to me, and most people talk their dogs in the daytime, but
less people on the streets at night, Dad said.
Yeah, he sure doesn't seem like a higher neighbor type of guy.
One other thing, Dad said. Kind of weird, but he's kind of weird, wouldn't you say?
I passed on the question and asked about the other thing. He's got a car. I don't know what it is, but he's got one. I found the registration online. It's a 1957 Studebaker. He gets a rate on the excise tax because it's registered as an antique, like the property tax. He pays the excise every year, but that's a lot cheaper, $60 or so.
If he's got a car, you should be able to find his driver's license.
That will say how old he is. He smiled and shook his head.
Good try, but no Illinois license has ever been issued in the name of Howard Bowditch. And of course, you don't have to be a driver's license to buy a car. You don't have to have one anyway. It might not even run.
Why pay the yearly tax on a car that doesn't?
Here's a better one, Chip. Why pay the tax when you can't drive?
What about Adrian Bowditch, the father, grandfather? Maybe he had a license.
I didn't think of that. I'll check.
He paused.
Are you sure you want to do this?
I do.
Then ask him about some of his stuff, because as far as I can find, he's almost not there.
I said I would, and that seemed to close the discussion. I thought about mentioning the weird scuttering sound I'd heard in the shed, The shed with a heavy padlock on the door, even though there was supposedly nothing in it. But I didn't. That sound had grown vague in my mind, and I had already enough to think about. I was still thinking about those things as I took the plastic dust cover off the bed in the guest room where I'd sleep during part of the spring vacation, or maybe even all of it. That bed was made up, but the sheets had a stale and musty smell. I took them off and put on fresh from the linen closet. How fresh I didn't know, but they smelled better, and there was another set for the pull-out couch along with a comforter. I went downstairs. Radar was sitting at the foot, waiting for me. I dropped the bedclothes on Mr. Bowditch's easy chair and saw that I'd have to move it and the little table beside it to pull the couch out. When I moved the table, the drawer came part way open. I saw a litter of change, a harmonica so old most of the chrome finish was worn away, and a bottle of carprofen. That made me happy because I had linked to think of Mr. Bowditch ignoring his aging dog's discomfort. And it certainly explained why the pet pantry lady had been so willing to sell me more. What made me less happy was realizing the medication wasn't working very well. I fed her, sticking a pill of the new bottle in her food, reasoning the stuff I just bought was fresh and maybe more powerful, then went back upstairs to get a pillow for the rollout. Radar was once more waiting at the foot of the stairs. Jesus, you gobble that fast. Radar thumped her tail and moved just enough for me to get by her. I plumped the pillow a bit, then dropped it on what was now a bed in the middle of the living room. He might grouse about it. Probably would. But I thought it would be okay. Pin care for his fixator looked easy enough, but I hoped there was something in home care for dummies about how to get him from the wheelchair, which I assumed he'd arrive in, and to the bed and back again. What else? What else? Stick the old bedclothes from the guest room in the washer, but that could wait until tomorrow, even Monday. A phone, that was what else. He'd need one close at hand. His landline was a white cordless that looked like it belonged in a TCM cops and robbers movie from the 1970s. The kind where all the guys had sideburns and the chicks have puffed hair. I checked to make sure it worked and got a dial tone. I was putting it back in its charging cradle when it rang in my hand. I yelped, startled, and dropped it. Radar barked. "It's okay, girl," I said, and I picked it up. There was no button to accept the call. It was still looking for one when I heard Mr. Bowditch. Tiny and distant. "Hello? You there? Hello?" So, no accept button and no way to check who was calling. With the phone this old, you just have to take your chances. "Hello?" I said. "It's Charlie, Mr. Bowditch." "Why is Radar barking?" "Because I yelled and dropped the phone. I was holding it in my hand when it rang." "Startled you, didn't it?" He didn't wait for an answer. "I hoped you'd be there because it's Radar's dinner time. You fed her, right?" "Right. She ate it in about 3 gulps." He gave a hoarse laugh. "That's her, all right. She's gotten a little shaky on her pins, but her appetite's as good as ever. How are you feeling?" "Oh, my leg hurts like damn hell even with the dope they're giving me, but they've got me out of bed today. Dragging that fixator around makes me feel like Jacob Marley. These are the chains I wore in life." He gave that hoarse laugh again. I was guessing he was pretty stoned. "Read the book or seen the movie?" "Movie, every Christmas Eve on TCM. We watch a lot of TCM at our house." "Don't know what that is." He wouldn't, of course. No Turner Classic Movies on a TV equipped with nothing, but what had Mrs. Sylvius called them, rabbit ears? "I'm glad I got you. They're going to let me come home on Monday afternoon, and I need to talk to you first. Can you come to see me tomorrow? My roommate will be down in the lounge watching the baseball game, so we'll have some privacy." "Sure. I made up the pull-out couch for you, also the bed upstairs for me, and stop a minute. Charlie." A long pause. Then, "Is keeping secrets in your repertoire as well as making beds and feeding my dog?" I thought about my father's drinking years, his lost years. I needed to look after myself a lot of the time back then, and I'd been angry. Angry at my mother for dying the way she did, which was stupid because no way was it her fault, but you have to remember I was only 7 when she got killed on the Garden Bridge. I loved my father, but I was angry at him too. Angry kids get in trouble, and I had a very able enabler in Bertie Bird. Bertie and I were okay when we were with Andy Chen, because Andy was kind of a Boy Scout, but when we were on our own, we got up to some fairly outrageous shit. It was stuff that could have gotten us in a lot of trouble if we'd been caught, some of it police-type trouble, but we never were. And my father never knew. Never would. If I had my way, did I really want to tell my dad that Bertie and I smeared dog shit on the windshield of our least favorite teacher's car? Just writing that down here when I promised to tell everything makes me cringe with shame. That wasn't the worst of it.
Charlie, are you still there?
I'm here, and yeah, I can keep a secret. As long as you're not going to tell me you killed someone and the body's in that shed. It was his turn to be silent, but I didn't have to ask if he was still there. I could hear his raspy breathing.
Nothing like that. But these are big secrets. We'll talk tomorrow. You seem like a straight arrow. I hope to Christ I'm right about that.
We'll see.
Now, how much am I in the bucket with you and your father?
Do you mean how much we have spent? Not that much. The groceries were the most. Couple of $100 in all, I guess. I saved the receipts.
There's also your time. If you mean to help me, you need to be paid. How does $500 a week sound?
I was flabbergasted. Mr. Bowditch, Howard, you don't have to pay me anything. I'm glad.
The workman is worthy of his hire. Book of Luke. $500 a week, and if things work out, a year-end bonus. All right?
Whatever he'd done in his working life, it hadn't been digging ditches. He was comfortable with what Donald Trump calls the art of the deal, which meant he was comfortable overriding objections. And my objections were pretty weak. I'd made a promise to God, but if Mr. Bowditch wanted to pay me while I fulfilled that promise, I didn't see any conflict. Plus, as my father was always reminding me, I had college to think about.
Charlie, do we have a deal?
If it works out, I guess we do. Although if he turned out to be a serial killer after all, I wasn't going to keep his secrets for $500 a week. For that, it would take at least $1,000. Thank you. I wasn't expecting it.
I know that.
He interrupted. An ace interrupter was Mr. Howard Bowditch.
In some ways, you're quite a charming young man. A straight arrow, as I said.
I wondered if he'd still think so, if he knew that one day while we were skipping school, the Birdman and I had found a cell phone in Highland Park and called in a bomb threat to Stevens Elementary. His idea, but I went along with it.
There's a flower canister in the kitchen. You may have seen it.
Not only had I seen it, he'd mentioned it to me, although he might have forgotten. He'd been in a lot of pain at the time. There was money in it, he said. Then said it was empty, said he forgot. Sure.
Take $700 out of it. 5 as your first week's wages, and 2 for expenses to date.
Are you sure?
Yes. And if you think it's bribe money, maybe sweeten you up for some outrageous request. It's not. Services rendered, Charlie. Services rendered. About that, you can be perfectly straight with your father. About anything we might discuss in the future, no. I'm aware it's a lot to ask.
As long as it's not a crime, I said, then amended it. Not a bad crime.
Can you come to the hospital around 3?
Yes.
Then I'll say good evening. Please give Radar a pat from that stupid old man who should have stayed off that ladder.
He hung up. I gave Radar several pats on the head and a couple of long strokes, nape to tail. She rolled over to have her belly rubbed. I was happy to oblige. Then I went into the kitchen and took the top off the flower canister. It was stuffed with money. There was a jumble of bills on top, mostly 10s and 20s, a few 5s and 1s. I pulled them out. They made a fair-sized heap on the counter. Below the loose bills were banded stacks of 50s and 100s. The bands were stamped First Citizens Bank in purple ink. I pulled them out, 2, and it took some wiggling because they were really crammed in there. 6 banded stacks of 50s, 10 to each. 5 banded stacks of 100s, also 10 to a stack. Radar had come out into the kitchen and was sitting by her food dish, looking at me with her ears pricked. Holy shit, girl. This is $8,000, and that's not counting the stuff on top. I counted out $700 from the loose bills, kneaded them, folded them over, and put the wad in my pocket, where they made a bulge. It was at least 10 times the amount of money I'd ever had in my person. I picked up the banded bundles, started to put them back in the canister, and paused. There were 3 little pellets in the bottom, kind of reddish. I'd seen one of those before in the medicine cabinet. I tipped them out and held them in the palm of my hand. I thought they were too heavy to be BBs. And if I was right in what I was thinking, it might go a long way toward explaining the source of Mr. Belcher's income. I thought they were gold. I hadn't ridden my bike, and the walk down the hill to our house only took 10 or 12 minutes, but that night I made it last. I had thinking to do and a decision to make. As I walked, I kept touching the bulge in my pocket, making sure it was still there. I'd tell Dad about Mr. Burgess's call and his offer of employment. I'd show him the cash, 200 for what we'd spent and 500 for me. I'd tell him to put 400 of it in my college account, which just happened to be at First Citizens, and promise to put in another 400 every week that I was working for Mr. Bowditch, which might last right through the summer, or at least until football practice started in August. The question was whether or not I should tell him about how much money had been in the flour canister, and of course, those gold BBs, if they were gold. By the time I let myself into our house, I had made my decision. I'd keep the fact of the 8,000 in the canister to myself and the BBs that weren't BBs, at least until I'd had my talk with Mr. Bowditch the next day.
Hey, Charlie.
My father called me from the living room.
Dog okay?
She's fine.
Good to know. Grab yourself a Sprite and grab a chair. Rear Windows on TCM.
I grabbed the Sprite, came in, and muted the TV. I've got something to tell you.
What could be more important than James Stewart and Grace Kelly?
How about this? I took the wad of money from my pocket and dropped it on the coffee table. I expected surprise, caution, and worry. What I got was interest and amusement. I thought Mr. Bowditch hiding money in one of the kitchen canisters fit right in with what he called the agoraphobe's hoarding mentality. I told him about the haul of old reading matter, not to mention the old TV and the elderly kitchen appliances.
Was there more in there?
Some, I said, which wasn't a lie. Dad nodded.
Did you check the other canisters? There might be a few hundred in with the sugar.
He was smiling. Nope. We took the 200.
Little more than we actually spent, but we'll probably need other stuff. Want me to deposit 400 of yours?
Sure.
Good call. In one way, he's getting you cheap, at least for the first week. Think a full-time home helper would get more. On the other hand, you'll be earning while you learn, and you'll only be spending nights up there during your spring vacation.
He turned to look at me squarely.
Are we clear on that?
Totally, I said.
Okay, good. Bowditch rattling money makes me a little uneasy only because we don't know where it came from, but I'm willing to give him the benefit of the doubt. I like that he trusts you, and I like that you're willing to take this on. You thought you'd be doing it for free, didn't you?
Yeah, I did.
You're a good kid, Charlie. Not sure what I did to deserve you.
Considering what I was holding back, not just about Mr. Bowditch, but some of the shit I pulled with Bertie, that made me a little ashamed. Lying in bed that night, I imagined Mr. Bowditch having a gold mine in his locked shed, maybe with a bunch of dwarves to work it. Dwarves with names like Sleepy and Grumpy. That made me smile. I had an idea that whatever was in the shed might be the big secret he wanted to tell me about. But I was wrong. I didn't find out about the shed until later. And that is Chapter 5 of Stephen King's novel Fairy Tale. I hope all of you sort of enjoyed that read. It was rather interesting. I'm glad we are sort of getting this story up and rolling and things are finally escalating to a point of interest. I do wonder what the fuck is in that shed. I have a general idea. I haven't read it. I think it might be some type of maybe an alternate door dimension to somewhere, maybe like an isekai kind of thing. Or maybe there's like a beast in the shed. I don't know, but it's quite strange. But anyways, thank you all for listening. Thank you all for tuning in. I hope that this little reading sort of gave you guys a bit of joy, gave you guys a bit of laughter, a bit of excitement and amusement. It's been quite a while since we read anything worth reading. I think about 1 or 2 months actually, but I'm glad to finally be back to this whole reading thing here. And when I eventually leave my job, I'll be able to read a lot more and probably upload them a lot quicker. So you guys have something to look forward to. But without any further delay, thank you so much for listening again. And until next time, my lovelies and my rats, goodbye.